Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another lesson. Tonight's goal is to conclude the chapter 8 that we started last week. A very quick summary. What we discussed before is last lesson. When someone consumes non-kosher food, even if he had no intention, he intended to eat kosher, and he actually utilized the energy for a mitzvah, serving God with that energy, it is bound with the unclean shells, and it will never be elevated to become holy. For that, we need teshuvah, and even the teshuvah only atones for the misbehaving, but will not remove it from the unclean klipot. If someone, and that's when we got into the second, and the rabbi concludes regarding that topic, that even after teshuvah, some remnants remains in the soul, even after teshuvah. I use the example of a poison. When someone consumes poison in the body, even after they cleanse, there will be some damage caused to the body, some tissue, some vein, something that unfortunately is irreparable. How do we read of it? And that is what we call chibut hakever. I think I told you that the simple interpretation of chibut hakever means the angels come and beat up the body after the person died. The Hasidic, the Kabbalistic explanation is that the body is get decayed in the grounds, and that is of great pain to the person. Just that process is very painful. And the reason it is very painful is because all the remnants of the misbehaving, even though teshuvah, repentance applied. This is the first category of consumption of food, which involves action and is forbidden, but the person repented. Yet there will be a process called chibut hakever. The second one is speech, which we got into. If someone is not speaking a sin like lashon hara, like gossiping or lying, but just idle talk. And we spoke about the idea that some people are unable to study Torah. They're too tired, they have worked hard, or they are unable. They don't have the brains for it. Idle talk itself is not, may sound it's not a sin. However, it creates a negativity to the body, and the body will have to cleanse itself, what we call kafakela. Kafakela, I told you, it's like a ping pong game where the body is the ball. The Hasidic interpretation is it is being thrown from very spiritual ecstasy, connection to the angel. Imagine you are very, very spiritual and you really are into it and enjoying, and then it was being pulled out into the physical pleasures of that, what the person was involved with, and that the reaping from one realm to the other causes great, great pain, so that he's able, and great shame for the soul, that's what the soul was busy and deriving pleasure. Just a minute, Pam, you had, not Heidi. Pam, Heidi, sorry.
That's fine. We were talking about my son about it. He gave the an analogy, I guess, of the cleansing of like a washing machine. Like
we're gonna go. The washing machine is another one. We didn't get there yet. Thank you.
I read it.
These things that happen in the time frames, a day, months, 3 weeks.
Last week we have discussed it, but I guess how long?
Well, the question was when the body gets punished after death, being bounced around, being decayed, is there a time frame? Is it happened 2 days? It happened in 11 months, 8 weeks?
So I'm going to show it you, not because I don't know, but because that's the real answer. you will find different targets in Jewish tradition. And at best, nobody came back to tell us. At best, the best way to explain it is it depends on the person and it depends on the time of year. For someone to die on Shabbat, they skip all that. For someone to die on a holiday, they skip all that. For someone to die just before so there is a period of 7 days. There is a period of 30 days. By the way, the two types of pain, chibut hakever and kaf hakela. Chibut hakever is the beating. I told you, it's not the beating. It's actually the process of the body getting decayed. The more the soul was attached to the body because it was involved in pleasures, the harder the more painful it is to see how the body is getting decayed and becoming nothing. Realizing all the pleasure deriving from the body was temporary. Instead, the person could have dedicated themselves into permanent pleasure, the study of Torah, helping a human being, teaching Torah, studying Torah. By doing so, it goes back. And I don't exclude myself from it because I'm guilty of that same sin. Sometimes we get involved in pleasure, whatever makes us happy, which may not be a sin, not about a sin. But what happens is, when you go up to heaven and you realize those moments, an hour at night, a half an hour by day, you could have studied Torah. You could have called somebody and visit them and spent time helping someone. You could have taken the money instead of buying something fancy, helping somebody, feeding somebody. What happened then? When you go up to heaven, I can't describe it in the true sense because we live in this universe where the pleasures of the world to come is in the book. And the pleasures from food and experiences are in this universe. If it was in the reverse, it would be difficult to explain the other way. You go up to heaven and you see that the pleasure you derive or the reward you get from spending time serving God is permanently. And you had an opportunity and no more. It will never come back. The best way to describe it, and I've not experienced that, but I've experienced it with close friends. Thank God my parents are alive. But I had close friends who unfortunately left us. The pain of not being able to see them is unbearable. And you say to yourself, if I had a little time, had I known, I would have spent extra time, I would have been there longer. Now think that you are told that now, for half an hour, you can connect with God, and that connection will help you for the rest of your life, for the rest of eternity. Instead, you went and got connected in going to amusement park, going to eat out and having fun, drinking beer. I'm nothing against beer. What happened? So what happens is that pain is called kaf hakela. Or chibut, I'm sorry, the first one is chibut hakever. That's called chibut hakever. In other words, you look at your body, you see the body is gone. The body will never give you any more pleasure. The body will not be there anymore. And you say, why did I take real pearls and exchange them with pearls in the soup? You know the famous story? They ask a man, what is he praying for on Yom Kippur? On Rosh Hashanah for the year, he says, I'm praying for pearls. He wants pearls. And the guy realized this man have never seen real pearls. So he says to him, tell me about the pearls. He says, the pearls, the soft pearls that you eat. He referred to in the soup, they used to have pearls. They're called pearls. In Hebrew.
No, not knedlach.
Knedlach is the big, long one. The pearls are the couscous, or ptitim in Hebrew, we call them. The small knedlach, yeah. They taste good, so you pray, so God willing, I should have enough money that I can buy pearls to have in the soup. And the Rebbe spoke about that. It says, unfortunately, sometimes comes Rosh Hashanah, gates of heaven are open, and instead of asking for real pearls, we're asking for those pearls in the soup.
You know, Rabbi, you mentioned about you don't know what happens afterwards because we don't communicate. but the midrashim where people come in the dreams and talk about what they've done or where they are, what's going on.
And it's correct. You're right. So there are many sources that talk about the period. You go back to the period. I believe that the longer you are involved in the physical pleasure of the body, the longer the pain of experiencing that letting go, because you have much deeper regrets if there is a 1 year's worth of wasted or 5 years worth of wasted. It takes longer. However, also it involves also the time of year. As I said, if someone died on Shabbat or the eve of Shabbat or on a holiday, they escape that. They're exempt. So we talked about two. Yes.
Days before the holiday, you start. What if someone dies a few days before the holiday? You said something?
So I started speaking. I don't know if you are aware, but someone who is sitting Shiva is 7, sitting Shiva morning after the loss of a dear close member of the family. Passover comes, cuts off Shiva. You know that? If he sat Shiva, and there is a period of 30 days for parents, there is a period of 30 days. If a holiday, only few major holidays come, what happens? It cuts off the 30th period, day period. Do you know? Are you aware of that?
30 days also.
The 30 days too. No, if it cuts off the current cycle. So if someone is mourning for 3 days and Passover arrives, he's exempt from sitting Shiva, but he has to observe 30 days. 30 days counting from the holiday minus 7 days, even though there is only 3 days past. So another 24 days, 23 days. You understand that? Now, what if he sat Shiva and it's the 8th day, the holiday arrives? The 30th day period ends at the beginning of the holiday. Anybody is aware? Do you understand? You don't, Ivan, do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand that? My mother-in-law passed away on the 11th of Nisan. 3 days later was Passover. So Passover is the only time that the first part cuts off one and the second part. And I'll explain you something else. During Corona, she passed away on 11th of Nisan. 4 days later, she didn't have to sit Shiva. Now she has a period of 30 days. For 30 days as a child, there are many, many restrictions. Came the last day of Passover. Once it passed, the 30-day period have gone. So she did not have to observe anymore. I have a cousin whose older brother, the parents have died, many of them living in America. The older brother died in the afternoon before Passover, I'm sorry, the day before Passover, during Corona, the same time. We're talking about 2021. Now, the family wanted to bury the person in Israel. The Jewish law is, I'm going on a limb here, but I think you're going to gain some Jewish knowledge. He died a day and a half before Passover. They wanted that the Shiva, that the mourning period begin before the holiday, so they don't have to see the 7 days. Otherwise, they'll have to wait after the holiday, 8 days later, to begin 7 days and 30 days. So what did they do? They rushed the body to be flown to Israel. Jewish law tells us that if a person body is transported out of town, out of the country, you begin to see Shiva the moment the coffin has left by. As soon as you can't see it anymore, that's where you begin. So they started sitting Shiva the day before Passover because they accompanied the coffin into the airport, and now they can sit Shiva. They sat a day and a half. The rest of the siblings in Israel accepted the coffin and they rushed it to the cemetery before the holiday, and they sat down in the cemetery for half an hour. That's all. So as long as they sit Shiva, part of a Shiva in the cemetery, that's it. Shiva period is gone. 30-day period is gone. Towards the end of the holiday, it's over. Imagine if they had to wait for a real funeral then they would, even if they buried it during the intermediary days, they would sit Shiva a full 7 days after the holiday, and nobody wanted to do it. This was Corona, COVID. It was a very painful experience, and they already lost another siblings few months earlier. So they just wanted to, nobody could sit Shiva. Nobody had patience during that time. Did I make myself clear?
Yeah.
Why do I share that? You asked me, why do I share that? I believe that it has to do with this. As soon as the holiday comes, God is giving you a parole. Parole, we call it, the president's parole. God gives parole. Pardon. Thank you. God will pardon everybody because it's a season of celebration, not just here, up there too. So what happens? He wants to pardon everybody. If the soul ascended up to heaven before burial allows the soul to ascend up to heaven. If the burial took place before the holiday, the soul have ascended. Once it's ascended, God paroles everybody and cleanses it up. Then you have another period to go through, another gate to pass through. The 30th period. That's the second holiday on Passover. It doesn't apply to all holidays. Back to our discussion. We spoke about two. One is forbidden food, and we spoke about idle talk. Now the rabbi is going to talk about sin, forbidden speech. Forbidden speech is a different category to atone. Here is the rabbi, and I told you, chapter 8 is an unusual chapter where the rabbi, so to say, wants to conclude and talks about the punishments, which is very unusual. Usually we don't talk about punishments. We are on page 129, I believe. Huh? Yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. So we are, I am reading the punishment. Page 131, you're right. The punishment, this punishment is described as being slung from, okay, we talked about that. Let's continue now to forbidden. But with regard to forbidden speech, such as scoffing and slander and the like, which being prohibited stem from the three completely unclean klipot, the hollow of a sling alone does not suffice to cleanse and remove the impurity of the soul, but the soul must descend into Gehinnom, purgatory, which is greater punishment and thus more effective in cleansing this soul. And now we can use Yitzhak Brown's analogy of a dry cleaners. Purgatory, we're going to discover, I'm going to give you a heads up. There are two types of cleansing, or we call it Gehinnom, hell. The most important part to know is it's only temporary for the purpose of cleansing the soul. And number two, it's willingly. No one is forced. Now, to explain that, there are two categories of purgatory. There is one purgatory of fire. It's a stream of fire. Fire in this world is a 1/60th of the fire, the pain of suffering from the fire up in heaven. And there is another purgatory called snow purgatory. Anybody heard of the snow purgatory? No, never heard? Gehinnom shel sheleg? No? For laziness. Anytime we do out of passion, because we want it, we have to have it. It's purgatory of fire, because fire has to cleanse, fiery, passionate, misbehaving. But when we sin out of laziness, come to study. Why are you sitting there and socializing? Oh, I have no energy. I am not interested. You can go to college. You can go to school. I'm not in the mood. I would rather, play computer games. That's called, for that, there is a second purgatory of snow. The coldness of snow is 60 times the coldest temperature you can reach in this universe. And there is no way to escape that other than just behaving and fixing what we misbehave. So for that, I have a story for you. I heard there was a true story. there was a mikveh man, a man that in charge of a mikveh. What? It's a bathhouse. What is a mikveh man? Like mikveh ladies for ladies. He's in charge of heating the water, keeping the place clean, and charging people. That's a mikveh man. In Tzfat, Tzfat is a holy town in the north. He was in charge of keeping the mikveh intact. One day he studied about heaven, hell or fire that is 60 times hotter than the fire here on earth. And he said to himself that he knows he's going to go through it. So he figured he'll get used to it. How will he get used to it? Every week he would raise the heat, the temperature of the water in the mikveh by 1 degree. So whenever somebody comes to dunk themselves, it gets hotter and hotter and hotter. Now, to me, it's extremely funny because I grew up in the 70s where nobody had money. And, so people would not take showers at home because for water, Israel also had water issues until 15 years ago. There was not enough water. But in the mikveh, they had 2 bathhouses, two pools. One was regular and one was extremely hot, almost boiling. The Russian Jews, they would go into those boiling ones. Once they come out, there was smoke coming out of their body. They were red. Now all they do is dunk themselves and come out. And the reason they did it is because they don't want to use electricity for Shabbat. I'm talking about Friday afternoon. They don't want to use electricity for Shabbat. So what they do is the second one, they heat it so high and then they turn it off. So by Shabbat morning, when people came to the mikveh, it was very, very hot. However, those who dare try to go in there, they would rush in and out. It was really like almost boiling. So this, back to our story, this mikveh man decided to prepare himself for when he goes up to heaven. So every week he raised the temperature of the bathhouse by 1 degree. And then people would dunk in. And you know the story about once you get used to it, it's much easier. What do you call it? There is a phrase for it. Once you get acclimated. And actually, he was able to get used to very high boiling water. By the time he ascended up to heaven, he was ready for it. But when he came before the heavenly court, they told him that unfortunately his hell is going to be snowy hell.
You don't have to go.
So he ended up with 2 hells here on earth, fiery hell. But you can't outsmart the system. Yeah.
Choice.
Huh?
You said it's a choice. You don't have to go through it if you don't want to.
Right.
So what's the story with it? Doesn't make sense.
Why?
The big guy has got all these sins. How does he decide to not go through power?
Do you ever attended a wedding of a friend
Yeah.
and your only suit available has a lot of stain, grease, and some of it is torn? Would you walk in? There is a dry cleaners offer a service right next to in the ballroom, right by the atrium. As you walk in, the hors d'oeuvres are here and there is cleaning service over there. And they say to you, we can clean it. We can clean it in 30 minutes. All you have to do is wait here. 30 minutes will be clean. It will cost you. The bigger the stain, the deeper the stain, the longer it will take and the more expensive it's going to get. You are the jacket.
But what I don't understand is why do you get a choice? Where's the choice?
You can refuse.
You're saying basically you can't refuse?
Sure.
You an offer you can't refuse?
I wouldn't be surprised if some people, I don't think you want to, there will be an exception, yes. Some people can refuse. Now, remember, this is temporary. Once you went through the cleansing, it's over. You're clean, you're ready for the party. You're dressed very fancy. So someone's soul is about to reconnect to the soul of the parents and grandparents and all the siblings. Would he come with all the stains, all the evidence of the misbehaving, misdeeds, or much rather hide it? Yes or no?
I'm just surprised that there's a choice element at all.
Of course, there is a choice. Actually, and I share that with you on many occasions, the biggest kindness that God does with us is offering us hell, not the reward. Hell is a choice that's far greater than the kindness of rewarding us for our good deeds. Because with hell, we can erase all our past. So when I stand before my grandparents or great-grandparents who are not here anymore, I don't have to be ashamed about my behaving. I'm all totally clean. And they don't because in front of me. So there is no, so there is no looking back at the person and with it in a negative way. So says the Rebbe, idle talk requires the ping pong, or as I said, moving from the physical and material to spiritual. Sin talk that is forbidden, requires teshuvah. If there is no teshuvah, it needs to be cleansed through the process like a dry cleaner. The darker or the deeper or the harder the stain, the longer and the much farther, much longer, much harsher chemicals, meaning the cleansing process is a much more difficult, and it's great pain to the soul. The soul is the one who gets the stain from the body's behavior. So when the body because the soul don't want the body to sin, but when the body made a choice to eat not kosher, to speak not nicely, to lie, it adds a stain to the soul. Sometimes it penetrates a hole in the soul, because the soul is the garment. The action, speech, and thought are the garments of the soul, and that's how the soul dresses. So when it goes up to heaven, it appears with those garments. The more the body caves in to the evil inclination, the greater the stains, and sometimes there are holes in the garments. The godly soul, where are we?
132.
Yeah. But it must receive the severe penalties which is meted out for neglect. No, I'm sorry. So too, on top of 132, with one who is able to engage in the study of Torah, but occupies himself instead with idle chatter, the hollow of the sling alone cannot effectively scar and cleanse his soul, but it must receive the severe penalties which are meted out for neglect of the Torah in particular. According to the Torah, our tradition is not spending time studying Torah when we have an ability to, is one of the greatest sins. However, the spending time of studying Torah will atone and connect us in a way that nothing else. We spoke in chapter 5 about studying Torah. Your entire mind is occupying with God, and God occupies you. That's why God stands next to you when you study Torah. So study Torah has a magic to it. It will serve us better than any other commandment, almost any other commandment, but at the same time, if we have an ability to study Torah and we do not, the punishment for that is much greater, much more severe than just other sins. Apart from the general retribution for the neglect of positive commandments through indolence, namely the purgatory of snow, as is explained elsewhere. So if someone refuses, do not spend time studying Torah instead, he's wasting time watching a movie, he's wasting time playing a computer game, what happens is, for that, there is a snow hell, because it's out of laziness, refusing to utilize his energy to study Torah. Again, I'm not trying to preach and tell you that you're wrong or that you're bad. I don't think it's true, because I am just explaining the text. I'm guilty of the same sin as you are, and perhaps even more, because of my background. The purgatory Gehinnom, where the soul is cleansed of the stains of the sins so that it may enter paradise to enjoy the radiance of God's glory, operates on the principle of measure for measure, that is, punishment in kind. Thus, sins of commission caused by the heat of passion and lust are cleansed in a Gehinnom, Nehar, literally stream of fire, while sins of omission due to our indolence and coolness, that is, lack of fervor, are cleansed in Gehinnom of snow. So now we discover two types of hell, two types of Gehinnom. It's not the hell that someone is going to burn in hell forever. It doesn't exist. There is no, God is not going to take revenge. It is simply an ability for us to remove and cleanse our past. However, depending on the sin or the stain, there are two types of cleansing. It is temporary, and the maximum one can be in hell is 12 months. But don't underestimate. Don't say another day, another week. That's not the case, because Einstein's law of relativity explained that if you put your finger on a fire for 2 seconds, it feels like 2 years, because the pain is so severe. So be very careful before you underestimate. And that's the Rebbe's point. The Rebbe wants to make sure that we are aware and be careful. The rabbi is moving now to another realm, the realm of using your brains and intelligence, which is the most gifted and guarded power or gift that God has given us. Occupying oneself with the intellectual disciplines of the nations of the world is likewise included in the category of engaging in inconsequential matter insofar as the sin of neglecting the Torah is concerned. For in studying the intellectual disciplines of the nations, too, one is guilty of neglecting Torah study, as is explained in the laws of Torah study. The rabbi says someone who is occupying himself discovering other religion, learning philosophy of other nations, by that time he could have studied the Torah. So that's one. Number one, there is a waste of time instead of study Torah. Number two, moreover, the impurity of the intellectual disciplines of the nations is greater than the impurity of idle speech. Why? The rabbi compares philosophy of other religion or other religion, the studying of them, comparing to someone who is just doing idle chatting. He's going to a comedy club, he's chatting and socializing. Why? For the latter, clothe and defile only the emotions which emanate from the holy element of ruach, air, within the divine soul, by tainting them with the impurity of klipat noga contained in the idle speech, which derived from the evil element of ruach, air, which is one of the components of this klipa in his animal soul, as mentioned above. However, the Rabbi is explaining, the godly soul and the animal soul are both composed of 4 spiritual elements: fire, air, water, and earth, as we discovered in chapter 1. The emotions, such as love and fear, which one expresses in idle talk, emanate from the element of air. Thus, idle speech defiles the emotional attributes of divine soul, which emanate from the holy element of air. By using them in the service of the animal soul, element of air, that is, its emotional attribution, which are impure since they derive from klipat noga. However, says the Rebbe, idle speech does not defiles the levels of Chabad, the intellectual faculties in his soul, for it is but words of foolishness and ignorance, since even fools and ignoramus can speak that way. However, since these are not intellectual matters, the intellect remains uninvolved and untainted. Not so in the case of science of the nations, thereby one clothes and defiles his divine soul's faculties of chokhmah, binah, dat, intellect, with the impurity of the klipat noga contained in those sciences. Whither they, the sciences, have fallen through the shattering of the vessel out of the hinder part of chokhmah, of holiness, as is known to the students of the Kabbalah. Anybody understood what we just studied? The point the rabbi is making is simple. when I involve in idle talk, which is not acceptable, I defile, I taint my emotions. It's from the heart, but nothing to do with intellect faculties, because everybody, even a stupid person, a simple person, can get involved in a conversation. However, when I'm involved in studying philosophy of other nations, for example, or discovering other religion, what I do is I use now my brains. When you use your brains for something which is not appropriate, I taint the highest, the most important faculty or part of my existence. And therefore, the staining or the defilement is much deeper and far greater. That's what the rabbi is saying. So if someone is involved in studying other teachers or other, so to say, secular science, they are defiling not only their heart or the emotions that stem from the heart, but also their brains, also their intellect, which is much greater and a far deeper sin. And as we're going to get to the exception. So by now, the rabbi has covered 3 garments of the soul. Action involves eating forbidden food without intention. Remember that. Second one was speech, idle speech or forbidden speech, right? Idle speech is the sling of the chibut of the kaf hakela, and forbidden speech is involving hell, either fiery hell or snowy hell. And now the rabbi is talking about intellect, thought, chokhmah bina dat. The intellect faculties, when they are involved, it's a much deeper sin, and it takes a lot longer to cleanse it. Thus, the study of these sciences contains the intellectual faculties of the godly soul, and it is therefore much worse than idle speech, which contaminates only the emotional faculties. Idle talk affects the emotions. Science talk, which is forbidden or for waste, affects the brains. However, here are the exceptions. Unless one employs them, these sciences, as a useful instrument, vis-a-vis as a means of earning a more affluent livelihood with which to be able to serve God. So if someone goes to college, I'm going to be practical. Someone attends university, goes to college. You ask him, why are you going to college? He says, because I want to be a doctor. I want to be an engineer. I want to be a politician. He's going for public affairs. He's going to learn history so he can use it in whatever area. As long as it's done for serving God is not for prayer or study. Serving God means that he will be able to live and make a good living to serve God and raise a family. That is acceptable. If, however, they go to college because my father wants to, also I can be part of the baseball team or basketball team, and he's going to study the philosophy or other foreign languages, which have nothing to do with him earning a living, we call it, you're not only wasting your life, but you are also tainting your brains. So that's one exception, to earn a living. Or, unless he knows how to apply them, the sciences in the service of God or to his better understanding of his Torah. That is, he utilizes mathematics to better understand the laws of the sanctifications of the new moon. Says the Rebbe, there is another exception. If you go to study science, so you are able to study Torah and understand the Torah better. Today, people would study nature and they discover God in nature. Today, people will study, because people study science, they are able to figure out the Torah law or the Torah teaching in a much deeper way than if they didn't. We have a doctor in town, in our Chabad, his name is Dr. Andrew Fine. He loves math. He loves math. He's a well-known doctor, very, very, very well respected. With math, the fact that he has so many units of math that he advanced, he is able to take it into Torah. And every week when he shows up on Shabbat, he comes to ask me questions about numerical values and how to configure certain words to make the numbers. And many a time he would be able to, so to say, dive and draw, bring back to the surface great pearls of wisdom only because of his deep understanding of math. The same is not necessarily for math. Science is enable us to live a better life. If I study science so I know how to eat well, so I learn how to have my emotion, my EQ, my emotional stability to connect with people, to find better jobs. These are not only allowed, but actually expected from us so that we are able to serve God better. Because later on, if we did not, we have missed many opportunities to serve God. So these are the exceptions, but we need to know that this is a, so to say, a very fine point that a person needs to judge before they get involved with studying science. This is the reason why Maimonides and Nachmanides, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon and Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman of blessed memory, and their peers, there were many other rabbis, doctors that went to colleges, the Lubavitcher Rebbe did, and their peers engaging them in the sciences, since they were able to utilize this knowledge in the service of God and Torah. So we have three exceptions to studying science. One is for the earning of a living, to utilize it as a tool to make a good living. Second is to understand the Torah better. There are parts of Torah that science enables us to grasp. Without science, it's very difficult. And third, to discover the beauty that God had created in the universe, to learn about animals, to learn about the surface, to learn about the oceans, and see how great God is. It is another exception. And therefore, you'll find many people who had attended colleges and universities. Regarding that which was stated at the beginning of this chapter, that a thing prohibited even by rabbinic enactment remains attached to the three unclean klipot and cannot be elevated to holiness, even when it is used unwittingly and for the sake of the heaven, that is in order to have strength to study and pray. The following story is worth relating. A Chassid once came to the Alter Rebbe lamenting the fact that his son-in-law was subject to periods when he would doubt his faith. The Rebbe responded that the son-in-law had unwittingly consumed milk, which was milked by a non-Jew with no Jew in attendance. Though he was unaware of this fact, and though the prohibition against such milk is only a rabbinic origin, this had so strong an effect upon him that it caused him to doubt his faith. The Alter Rebbe then proceeded to tell the Chassid how the matter could be rectified, thereby healing the son-in-law of his spiritual malady. It's a famous story where a man came to the Rebbe about, I'm going to summarize it, about his son-in-law, that now he has questions in faith, and the Rebbe says to him he should check about what he takes into his mouth. Because when someone eats non-kosher, even though he goes to Koilel and he studies Torah all day, it will not ascend up to heaven, and that part of the person consumed remains unclean, and that energy is defiled energy, stays here, will never be elevated. As soon as son-in-law rectified, things happen. The Lubavitcher Rebbe with the Rebbe, there are many stories when people had health issues or doubts about the existence of God, and the Rebbe would answer, kashrut ha'achila v'shtiyah. Make sure that you eat kosher for 6 months for a period of time, and now suddenly you'll have no doubts. There were yeshiva boys that had doubts about faith in God, and the Rebbe, and they couldn't tell where it came from because they were raised in a certain way, in a very particular way, and they lived a certain way of believing God and following. And the Rebbe says, you probably don't realize, but you are consuming something that's not kosher, and that affects your soul as well. As soon as you rectify this, everything will go better. So we have concluded chapter 8. Next week, God willing, we will get to chapter 9. In chapter 9, the rabbi is going to now deal with the internal war or fight that exists within the two souls. Right now, the Rebbe, so to say, has summarized different behavior that exists within the body and the outside, or what happens after life. Now the rabbi is going to talk more about the two souls fighting each other. Freud would have been a good student of the chapter 9 because that's exactly in his hobby. So we'll conclude here and continue next week, God willing. All right. Be well, everybody.